The hybrid work environment is a reality for most construction companies. You have folks that are working from home, folks that are working in the office, folks that are doing both as well as working in the field. How do you manage that hybrid work environment? It's a challenge for many people. People are missing out on that opportunity to learn by osmosis, by being in close contact with each other. Communication silos are created. There can be challenges with the divisions between people who are in the office and people who are working from home. Why is that person at home when they should be in the office where I'm at working hard? All of these kinds of issues can come up in this hybrid work environment that many people find themselves in. And that is exactly what I talk about today with my guest, Elizabeth Wesley Cassell. She is an expert in internal communication in organizations, and we talk about how you can be effective in a hybrid work environment. And really, it's all about your leadership. So as we dive into this discussion, you're going to go away with some specific takeaways about how important it is for you to clearly communicate the strategic goals of the organization. Make sure that everyone in your organization is dialed in terms of their role and responsibility. And perhaps most importantly, spending time with people, whether they're working from home or in the office, developing relationships so you have the level of trust necessary to make that hybrid work environment as effective as possible. So as I always say, enjoy my conversation with Elizabeth. She's out of Washington, D.C., and at the end of the podcast, she has a great restaurant recommendation that you should check out. Get in touch with her via all of the social media links, etc., that are in the show notes. And of course, feel free to share Construction Genius with anyone who you think would benefit from listening to the show, and give us a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy my interview with Elizabeth. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. All right, Elizabeth, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here.
I'm happy to have you on the show because you're an expert in a new work environment that we've entered into over the last 12 to 18 months, and that's the hybrid work environment. That's a buzzword that a lot of folks are talking about right now. Tell me what you mean by a hybrid work environment.
Well, as we matured through the year 2019, most all of us understood that if you had a job, you went in, 90% of the population went into an office and worked collaboratively with their teammates, and you could answer questions over the top of a cubicle or meet people in the hallway and problem solve. What happened in 2019 was that a majority of businesses had the forced remote work scenario hoisted on them, and they weren't prepared for that. Everybody worked for the last 18 months to make that work, and now that offices are opening up, businesses are having a challenge with regard to who to bring in and who is willing to come in to perform the day-to-day work that needs to happen in order to support business goals. Okay. So the hybrid work environment means that you're dealing with people who are both on-site and off-site, and you're having to work through challenges of workflow and process in that combined scenario.
What is the biggest challenge with workflow and process that people are facing in your experience?
Overwhelm. And here's what I mean by that. When you have a team of dedicated people who have, let's say, been with your organization for a really long time, and they're invested in the success of that organization, those people are used to being problem solvers. When you upend your day-to-day rituals and the way that you communicate with people and the way that you execute your reporting, the tendency for those highly invested problem-solving individuals is to spin every plate and catch every ball. And that in turn creates vagary within job responsibilities. The gates of responsibility become blurred, and people don't understand what they're actually tasked with and responsible for versus what they can do and what they've just done over the last 6 months, and people depend on them. So people lose the guidance and succinct measures of what their job description is and what they're actually responsible for doing. And it also eliminates some of the opportunities for people to grow within the company. Because when you have people spinning plates in a traditional scenario, oftentimes it's the let's call them newer employees, the newer teammates will step up and problem solve. But if everybody's problem solving at the same time, that becomes very complicated and a lot of toes get stepped on. And oftentimes processes and workflow aren't documented because you just have people reaching in and solving the problem in real time.
It's interesting you mentioned this phrase day-to-day rituals. What are some day-to-day rituals that a company needs to establish in a hybrid environment when you have folks in the office and folks still working from home?
Well, I come from the construction background. I started my career working with the Mills Corporation and Simon DeBartolo.
Uh-huh.
So I understand what it's like to be on the site and to have a day-to-day task list that includes building a wall here and checking the blueprints there. The rituals that I'm talking about, whether they're administrative or they're physical productivity and construction, they vary. And depending on whether or not you can be on site and can be working with your colleagues to solve problems, when you are now no longer face to face and able to engage with other people, you're losing 70% of the efficacy of communications. Those conversations that used to be part of your, I know my job like my right hand, a lot of those processes kind of dissolve because you don't have a team that is working together to solve a problem and instinctually understands who picks up what pieces and who doesn't. Now you're having to figure out, how do I communicate what I need to those people, rather than standing next to them and kind of engaging in the energy that comes off of your teammates.
So this leads me to, I think, a key word, and one of the ways that I know construction companies have struggled over the last year, and this is the idea of learning by osmosis. So let's say last year in 2020, I hired a project engineer fresh out of college, and they're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to rock and roll. And yet for the past year, they haven't been spending much time with the superintendent or the project manager, learning side by side with that person how to talk to an owner, how to deal with problems, how to overcome challenges. In your experience as you're working with companies, how does that learning by osmosis barrier get overcome in a hybrid environment?
This goes back to one of your recent episodes that I loved, where you talked about onboarding new people. The point that you made during that podcast was that it's important for the new person to buddy up with someone else. So learning by osmosis in a traditional setting may mean that you are taking the new person and someone from leadership, and they get to find those best practices, they get to see them, they get to experience them in real time. But we're finding that is a little bit easier now is if you do the buddy system at a peer level with a teammate. So rather than leadership carving out additional time from their schedule to loop in the new person, because they're probably working on strategy and they're probably trying to figure out what is the next applicable move to make in this environment that is highly complex. The peer-to-peer buddy system gives the new person the ability to learn what the ropes are, learn what the culture is, talk about best practices, and if you've done a really good job hiring and your house is in order, meaning that you have documented processes, clean job descriptions, you've brought in high caliber talent, that person can then start contributing new ideas about how to reach the goals that are either quarterly or annually because they hopefully have had some experience in a previous environment that says, this led me to execute something that solved a problem here. I think that is transferable to the business situation that I'm in now. So the buddy-to-buddy relationship development early on not only adds to productivity, but it adds to improved culture. And that is what is really key right now. My background is both in Lean and Six Sigma, so I understand setting metrics for productivity and accountability and why that's important. But in the environment that we have today, and I can't stress this enough, culture is going to be a very important piece for business leaders, whether it's the construction industry or any other industry. Culture is where people need to focus right now in order to not only keep the ball moving forward, but to retain and attract high caliber talent. Because if you bring people into the conversation about identifying the problems and solving the problems, you have a higher retention of the people on your team that you want to keep there.
Okay. Now, culture is something that many people think about, and obviously it's extremely important. Tell me what you mean by that word culture.
For the work that we perform, I'm not talking about the HR definition of culture and possibly DE&I. I'm talking about the relationships and the trust that teammates have together. When you have an organization that is divided into several different departments, each one of those pods or teams has their individual challenges. And what you want to do is have a team that understands that workflow for that particular piece of the job, and that they can problem solve or identify problems on their own and work proactively to solve them, or at least bring solution options to the table to leadership, and make sure that the workflow is streamlined. You're always wanting to iterate to create a scenario or an ecosystem where your productivity is high, and the problems or the challenges that you're facing, you see them on the horizon before you're actually experiencing them in real time.
It's interesting you link this idea of culture with the overcoming of silos. Construction can be tremendously siloed from the project side to the field side to the estimating side. How have you seen companies who are most effective at acknowledging those silos exist and being productive as you're managing the differences between the silos?
I have a client that, though not in construction, they work in trauma care in austerity environments, meaning they're in the Northern Triangle and Syria and other war zones, basically.
Yep.
What we found was effective for them was to not only create a reporting cadence that eliminated too many stand-up meetings and daily check-ins and all the minutia that people were starting to latch onto that made them feel like they were under control, but also to create team leads that were responsible for problem solving, reporting out, and showing up to make sure that that communication was robust. So in a construction environment where you have all of these silos, it's really important to make sure that you're constantly maintaining communication, whether it's written or if it's in person, and also to identify those people who have an interest in communicating that information forward. And we're also finding over the last 6 months that it's really, really valuable to have almost a system in place to remind leaders to say thank you. And people have different languages how they like to be thanked. Some of them it's monetary, some of them it's a title, some of them it's just an actual thank you. But finding out the ways that team leads like to have engagement and find fulfillment and find that their investment in an organization really matters, that has become crucial for good communication and retaining talent.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know in my work with construction companies, the thing that I've seen is most effective in overcoming those silos is when the heads of the departments are working on their personal relationships with each other. Because if their personal relationships are strong in the work environment, then that trickles down throughout their organization, and they really have to make the effort not to think of, the field and my guys or the office and my team, but really bridging that gap through communication with their peer in the other silo. That helps to bridge the gaps lower down the chain in terms of project managers and superintendents communicating well with each other. It's really interesting that.
I agree with you 100%. It's also modeling the right behavior for those that you're going to groom to be in leadership later.
Yeah, now you just said it better than I did right there, that modeling behavior. So if I'm as a senior executive, if I'm modeling a good relationship with my counterpart in the other silo, others will see that, and that'll trickle down throughout the organization. Let me ask you this here. Now, one of the tensions is the silo that is created by this hybrid work environment when I have folks who are in the office and they are looking at people who are still at home and they're thinking, come on, get in the office, let's get to work. Things are not as efficient as they should be. How do you help people through that tension that's created by the different groups of folks, some in the office, some still at home?
Part of the process that we go through is to begin every contract with a really deep, detailed assessment, a blind assessment that every person involved in the organization completes, whether it's leadership or it's the people doing the work that needs to be done. And I follow that up with one-on-one interviews. The assessment covers everything from, do you understand how decisions are made through leadership, to are you comfortable with the software that you're using, do you understand the gates of responsibility. But when I get into the phase where I'm doing the interviews, those depend a lot on questions and answers surrounding culture. So how do you feel about your job? Do you feel as though you have input into the decision-making process? Do you understand your job responsibilities? Are your job descriptions actually what you are accomplishing each day, or do they need to be tweaked? So when we're trying to create those conversations and build that confidence in one's job, we're also at the same time trying to plumb whether or not there is an us versus them thought process,
Right.
or if there's a collective and collaborative feeling that, okay, I don't understand why somebody gets to stay at home and I don't. We do those assessment and survey pieces at the very beginning so that we can have an understanding of the landscape. And then the next piece is to go directly into focus groups. And during those focus groups, we talk about what does it look like when you're trying to reach your goal and you don't have everybody in the same place, or you don't have everybody on board with the same vision of how the goal should be accomplished. And it's surprising that during that focus group time, we usually are able to, because me and my team, we are an unbiased third party, we get some really real conversations, a lot of honesty. And the outcome of that is that we also get some really good solutions, really creative stuff, and oftentimes from people that, let's say, leadership didn't expect to use their voice. So we're getting the benefit of a couple really great pieces of information within that activity. One is, what is the problem as the people who are doing the work see it, which is often different than what leadership sees. How do we solve it in a way that the people who are doing the work are going to have buy-in? And then also, who's prepared to be a creative problem solver and bring solutions to the table that maybe we didn't identify that we should be looking at to groom for future leadership positions? It's a really powerful activity that oftentimes brings a lot of camaraderie to the group.
Let me ask you about creative problem solving. Construction is problems, problems, problems every single day. If you don't like problems, then get out of construction, right? What are some of the most effective creative problem solving frameworks that you have seen companies use over the years?
Oh boy. To a certain degree, that is dependent on the organization and the culture that they bring to the table. For example, a family-run organization is going to have a very different culture than one that is corporate from the beginning to the end. If you have people who've been on board, let's say your controller's been part of your organization for 20 years and they are a knowledge node, they're going to be much more comfortable trusting a process that is leadership down. So leadership has brought in a model that they've read about or heard about, or somebody's currently coaching and it's the hot thing to do. They're going to be comfortable participating in that, whereas the newer person may not. And in a highly corporate environment where there are no personal attachments, very few relationship building opportunities, hardly anybody's going to be really comfortable with that. So from our experience, the model that works best is to start mining solutions from the people who are doing the jobs right now. It doesn't mean that the outcome is the same from organization to organization, but it means that the team feels heard and their concerns are heard. And right now, because the Great Resignation is a thing, it's really happening. People are leaving their jobs. And the pandemic seems as though it's going to be lasting longer than we thought, making the hybrid workforce experience lasting longer than we may have expected, 6-10 months ago. Listening to your teams and allowing them to bring the solutions to the table is the most successful process or model that we've run across. And we've tried several. And we've had organizations say, yes, we love what you're doing, but I just read this in HBR over the weekend. Can you implement this problem solving model and see how it goes? Through iterative testing, we found that those can be just fine. But when those other types of models are requested for implementation, it's often because somebody has read an article or a study that says Google's environment and Google's culture did this, and they're trying to superimpose somebody else's solution on their own organization. If you let an organization, which really is an ecosystem, it's a interdependent living organism, create its own solution, you retain your people and you reduce costs much faster.
So there needs to be then an understanding of the culture and a willingness from the executive team to tap into the genius of the people who are actually on the ground working on the problem.
Yes. And it's not woo-woo, and it's not all, I mean, it is soft skills, but it's not soft.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. So let me ask you then, in terms of managing performance, because the fear that many people have, and it's been borne out in some circumstances, is that if I can't see my people, their performance is going to be affected. How do the best companies who are successful in the hybrid environment, how do they manage the performance of their folks?
This is going to sound antithetical. However, that's usually a leadership problem. If you've hired good people, you need to show them where the North Star is and get out of the way.
Okay.
If you are concerned that your team is going to lose their momentum or their direction unless you are in it with them every day 24/7, then you either haven't trained your people right or you've hired the wrong people. And a lot of organizations are finding that brushing up on their leadership coaching, executive coaching, is an investment that's worthwhile for them. We don't perform leadership coaching per se, but we do give some really great direction when organizations want to provide that service for the people who they've invested highly in. Now, none of that is to say that it's not human nature right now to want some control over something. We all could use with a little more control in our lives. We've had a lack of it for 18 months, if not more. So that little brush up and maybe additional classes or conversations or one-on-one coaching with somebody who really knows how to speak your industry language or speak to the crisis, like pretend it's scaling or, any number of different scenarios. There are people who specialize in talking people through that, as well as the need to control. When leadership has a light touch, but a very clear vision, usually the people who are doing the jobs, again, if they are the right hires, are going to be the ones that step up to the plate with initiative, being proactive, reporting out well, and establishing what they see as the landmines on the horizon and the solutions that they can bring to the table.
So I think it's very interesting. I really like that idea of clear vision and light touch. And if I'm hearing you correctly here, what you're saying is that if my people are struggling in a hybrid environment with their performance, then perhaps it's my fault because I've hired the wrong people. Did I hear that right? And it's okay to be that direct, Elizabeth. It's perfectly okay.
Yes. And it takes a process to figure out if that's the answer. It might be that you didn't hire the right people. It might be that you're trying to be too controlling. It also might be that they need more guidance. But the way to find the bottom of that barrel in the baseline is to speak to your teams. You can only find out which of those possible solutions or scenarios it is if you talk and listen. Listening being actually more important than talking.
Yep.
So I encourage leaders to, at a very minimum, have on their calendar, base touching meetings every quarter. So sitting down and listening to what people have to say, what they think their challenges are, what they think solutions are. And those challenges might not be just, I don't have weekly reporting from my subordinate or my peer. They might be, hey, I think that as a group, my silo or my department isn't clear on what we need to do this quarter in order to achieve the annual strategic goal at the end of the year. So that back and forth exchange will help you tighten up your descriptions, your relationships, and productivity. Because during those conversations, you find out, oh my gosh, you just burned daylight on this thing that's really priority level green when you should be looking more toward priority level orange and red.
So let me ask you this then. You just brought up an important aspect of leadership, and that's the skill of listening. Tell me what you think let me ask it this way. How can I become a good listener?
It takes practice, and it probably, for some people, takes coaching or reading, some education. Really, it's coming to the table with, I understand, is the 8 C's, compassion, curiosity, really wanting to take the time to find out if the person in front of you is clear on where you want to go, and then just taking a beat, listening to them, letting them have a space to share ideas, share even wild ideas. The need for people to dominate and control a conversation isn't because they're smarter, isn't because they make more money, it's not because they have had, more time in an industry. It's often because people are uncomfortable with that quiet, paused space. But if you can sit through that, the person that you are trying to get the information from, for the most part, will be the ready participant in this exchange. It really is a partnership to have a conversation. And the person who is doing the listening usually ends up being the one that benefits from that conversation the most. So if you can sit with your success and your leadership and the station in life that you're at, and ask somebody what they think, or what they think a solution is, or what they think the problem is, be present and be calm, you will walk away with insights that you didn't have before that conversation, making you a more well-rounded leader and probably a better manager.
So you said something at the beginning of that about the 8 C's. You mentioned, I got 2 of them, compassion and curiosity. What are the other 6?
Off the top of my head, I cannot remember because I'm having a mind blank. However, they are part and parcel of psychotherapy model called internal family systems.
Uh-huh.
And it really has to do with being present with all of the different parts that you bring to the table and allowing them to be calm and engaging another human being.
So through the power of the internet, I just found those 8 C's, and I'm just gonna pull them up here real quick. So we've got calm, clarity, curiosity, compassion, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness.
Yes. And I do not feel bad about not being able to remember them all off the top of my head. The founder of this psychotherapy model is a friend and past client of mine. He often misremembers too. So
no, you're good. You're good, Elizabeth. I
okay.
think, yeah, no, it's totally cool. I'm just interested because I do think that listening is such an important skill for executives, and it's a very difficult one. I don't know many executives who are naturally good listeners. They really have to work at that. And so this idea of compassion and curiosity, I think, is really important. How can someone stay calm, do you think? Because I know a lot of executives who are not naturally calm. They're naturally very driven, and that's why they're in executive roles. How do you think an executive can stay calm in a difficult conversation with someone who reports to them, or maybe a peer or something like that, and in terms of being able to hear what's being said?
In a scenario where you are working on a team and the whole point of the exercise is to better the scenario, approaching the conversation with a level of trust that you are engaging with someone who is as invested as you are is a great place to start. Not all conversations are going to be easy to remain calm through, but not all conversations are about improving the situation that you're currently in with someone who's already on your side. So if you're in collaboration with someone during a conversation and the whole point of it is to make the scenario or the quarterly workload or the next step in a project better, if you can trust that you are in that conversation with an ally or a peer or a collaborator, that takes a lot of the need for speed out of the conversation, out of the moment. And realizing that if you're in it with a collaborator, that means that you are talking to an individual that has a different perspective than what you have, and probably brings that different perspective and different solutions to the table. If all you want to do is sit and listen to yourself talk, you might as well just hang out in the bathroom and talk to the mirror the entire time. But if you want to make things better and see how other people see the problem and see what other solutions will have that you may have not, thought of yourself, no matter how smart you are, then trust is a huge piece of the equation that can give you that space and that grace to have an exchange.
In your experience, how do effective executives develop trust with the people that they work with?
They spend time with them. They make time in their schedule to get to know those people. Whether you only have enough time to develop those relationships with leadership, or you have enough time and your team is small enough that you develop those relationships with everyone down the line in the hierarchy, that may be a case-to-case situation. However, the people that are the most successful executives and the most successful leaders know who their teams are. They've invested enough to know what the team's strengths are or what individual challenges are, and they have an idea about the people that they are depending on, that they can understand who has super talents and super skills in different areas, and they know under which circumstances to turn to them and which conversations to have.
It's interesting. So the development of trust, it takes time.
And that's why this is important right now. Because of the hybrid environment, we are losing that connectivity.
Yes.
And so refocusing our energy on making sure that we are going above and beyond to develop those relationships and create those understanding and create that sense of intimacy is really, really important. And it doesn't sound like what you should be doing during a crisis 2-year period, but it actually is. You can't solve problems of human retention and talent retention with shiny new objects like the latest CRM or the latest project management software. Solve these problems by understanding the humans that you surround yourself with.
Very interesting. So let's talk about that a little bit more then. Hybrid is a reality for most companies at the moment. Who knows how long that will last? What are 3 action steps the president or the CEO of a company can immediately take to make hybrid as effective as possible?
1, make sure that your annual strategic goals are broken down into quarterly goals, and that every single person is aware during each quarter exactly what they should be shooting for. Okay. Now, if that means that you are, going over them in your team meetings on a weekly basis, or you're doing something like I do with my team, and I sent everybody a digital frame, and within that frame, our strategic annual goals and our quarterly goals just rotate around all the time. Keep those front of mind for your teammates so that when they're working without guidance, they know how to make decisions that support that next step. Excellent. And they understand how each step builds on the other one. Another one is to go in right now and identify whether or not your job descriptions are tight and on track for the work that your people are doing today. Because the work people are doing today is not the same work that they were doing 18, 19 months ago. If they're in the field, you probably have, additional labor tasks that people need to have on deck. If you are dealing with administration, you definitely have different roles and responsibilities that are involved in that. It could just be that the move to Zoom means that your, administrative assistants are now required to have a deeper understanding of technology. Make sure that that information is in their job description, because clarity allows people a direct pathway to success, and being able to achieve success means that people are fulfilled in their job. There's nothing that's coming down the pipeline that's confusing to them, and they don't know where they stand or what you expect. And I think the third one is building time into your calendar to develop your relationships. As much as you may be used to developing relationships with investors, you need to find it just as important to develop relationships with the people that work for you.
I really like that. So number 1, make sure that your annual and quarterly goals are clear and visible. Number 2, make sure that everyone understands what their job description is and what they're responsible for. And number 3, make time to spend time with people, whether they're in the work from home or in the office environment, so that you get to know them and build that trust that you spoke of.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Elizabeth, I really appreciate your time, appreciate the insights today. I know that you're corporately based out of Washington, D.C., so if I'm ever going to be visiting Washington, D.C., what's the one restaurant I need to hit?
Downtown in the K Street area is a fantastic restaurant called Moderna, and they have some of the most creative Italian food that I've probably ever had, but it's not your traditional family style Italian. It's really beautiful, creative seafood, and it's delicious. It's just fantastic.
And that's Moderna? How do you spell that? Modena. I just found it.
Yeah.
Yep, I got it. Okay, so we're going to put a link in the show notes to that restaurant?
I was just going to say, my friend is the chef there. John is amazing. And if you get a chance to bring him out to your table, he's a wonderful conversationalist too.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate your time and your insights here today, Elizabeth. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and who you work with.
Certainly. L12 Services is an internal communications firm dealing with workflow, process, and culture. We help to streamline the business practices of organizations. We have worked across many industries, from NGOs, as I described earlier, to construction companies, to tech in the Silicon Valley. We're also making some headway in the renewable energy sector, which is very exciting because if the infrastructure bill makes it out of the Senate, those are teams that are going to need to hit the ground running and have their systems and their workflow tight. So we're starting those conversations now, and it's just really a fun time to be in the information organization space.
That's awesome. Awesome. And if people want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you?
Our website is l12services.com, and I am on LinkedIn, Elizabeth Wesley Casella. It's spelled in a very unique way. There's no E at the beginning of my first name, and Wesley Casella has the vowels in all the wrong spots. But since it's unique, I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Well, we'll put links in the show notes to your website and to your LinkedIn profile, as well as your restaurant recommendation. Elizabeth, thank you for your generosity and your time today on Construction Genius.
Thank you, Eric. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Awesome. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.